World War II, lasting from 1939 to 1945. In the course of 6 years, over 70 million people died. To put that in perspective, over 20,000 would die each day. Of course, America didn't take part in the war until December of 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But where did America get all the supplies and all the metal it needed to keep up with the rest of the world? How did America get from woefully unprepared to winning the war in mere months? And where did all the materials come from? Who made them? And that is where our story begins.
Hello, my name is Connor Schmidt, and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When most people think of World War II, they think of the battles fought in the Europe and South Pacific. But what many people don't realize is that without the resources and the hard work of people in places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, we might not have been as successful in the war. The labor, materials, and economic resources in places like Pennsylvania have been called the Arsenal of America by World War II historians. For example, U.S. Steel was one of the largest providers of steel that was needed to make the tanks, bullets, machine guns, and other equipment which helped America and her allies win the war. Westinghouse also helped with the war by providing many needed products. The war effort and cutting-edge work at Westinghouse resulted in many scientific advancements in plastics, radar, X-rays, bomb sights, and atomic energy. But it did not stop there for Pennsylvania. In Philadelphia, also called the Workshop of the World, the U.S. alone created the majority of the aircraft carriers and nearly half of all the cruisers and destroyers in the world's navies. Factories in Philadelphia created many items for the war effort, like aircraft and guns. The Philadelphia factories also produced uniforms and even mosquito nets for the troops. The U.S. naval shipyards made many of the ships that fought in the seas around Europe to drive back the Germans from the lands they invaded. Not only will we travel to the two biggest cities in PA, we will also interview people who have lived through the war, and we will also get up close to the many things that made this war special. So, shall we begin?
For 4 years, the U.S. worked hard for the good of the country, trying to end the war. One of the people who still remembers this is Jack Schmidt, a native of Philadelphia. Although he was 3 years old when the bombing of Pearl Harbor occurred, he remembers distinctly the sights and sounds of Homefront Philadelphia. This is Mr. Jack Schmidt, and I'm going to talk to him about Philadelphia and World War II. For starting off questions, how old were you, and where did you live during World War II?
Well, I was before 7 years old was during the war. I was 7 years old after the war. I lived in South Philadelphia, 2 blocks from the waterfront.
Okay.
With my mother and father, my grandmother, my uncle, and aunt.
Okay. Can you describe the mood of the city during the war?
Very patriotic, very tough. Everybody worked. There were 3 shifts going on all the factories and on the waterfront.
Okay.
There was trains coming in constantly, bringing material into factories, building stuff for the war effort, and putting them on ships and shipping them overseas.
Is there anything specific that the factories built that was important to the city?
The city or the war?
Well, either one.
Well, mainly it was for the war effort. Nothing was getting done with the city.
Okay.
We're building tanks and uniforms and you name it, machine parts, ships,
Okay.
guns.
How did this mood affect daily life?
Well, it was very patriotic. It was
Okay.
very patriotic.
Okay. Alright. Did you take a part of anything in the war, like community activities or anything?
We used to collect tinfoil when we were kids.
Okay.
Can you describe what that was like?
What's that?
Can you describe what that was like?
Well, you could peel it off of cigarette packs. Used to have tinfoil around them, and you could peel it off and roll it into a bowl and sell it for scrap. So it was actually aluminum.
Okay.
And scrap metal, you could pick up scrap metal and sell it to a junkyard. They would turn it into war material.
Okay. As you've just heard from Mr. Schmidt, the war effort was very important to the people of America. Even little things like a cigarette box were almost sacred to the people during the war. People were especially respectful of the American flag. Next, I went to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard to explore what it had to do with the war.
The Philadelphia Naval Shipyard was founded in 1801. This naval yard served as a repair yard and a factory of naval guns before both World Wars. It was not until the start of World War I that the naval yard actually served its intended purpose of building warships. However, the naval yard was still woefully unprepared to serve as the key in the Navy's two-front war. In 1938, the Department of War put large amounts of money to America's shipyards in case America entered the war. This was one of the fastest expansions in the Navy's history. In 1940, 2 dry docks were built in the Philadelphia Naval Yard to keep up with the Navy's need for close to 10,000 ships in the war. The Naval Aircraft Factory in Philadelphia saw over 50,000 planes leave its doors during the war. The Naval Shipyard and the many factories in the area provided much-needed jobs. President Roosevelt promised to create the need for over 11,000 more jobs. The workforce rose from 10,000 in 1941 to 60,000 in 1944. The world's largest battleship at the time, the USS New Jersey, was launched from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard on December 7, 1942, the anniversary on the attack of Pearl Harbor.
Good.
After the war, the ships in Europe and the South Pacific were sent back and mothballed, which basically means that they were dried out and stored in case they were needed again. Next, I talked to Eugene L. McLear, a signalman on the USS Monterey, who served from 1942 to 1945. What's your name?
My name is Gene McLear, Eugene McLear. And I just turned 18
Okay.
for the time for,
Mm-hmm.
and I went enlisted then, and then one day later I'm going to book Sampson, New York.
Okay.
There's Sampson, I enlisted there. Got me on 2 days later, got me on a train, and I had to go midnight, to get on board my ship and list.
Okay.
And my 30-day list lasted to 29 or 31 days. And I was transferred back to Philadelphia, and I was going to go on the USS Monterey, and I did 32 days. And from 32 days, I got on that ship, and we took it right out to Panama Canal, through the Panama Canal. Kept on going. We lived in there, and so they asked me now. Well, I went back. I had no idea where. It took 4 hours or 3 hours just to get over there.
To get through the canal?
Get to the canal, or yeah, that's where we stayed. We got there. We didn't stop at sailing. We just raced the next day, but we were tied up in the plane.
As you can hear from Mr. McLear, it was quite an adventure for him just to get to the Pacific Ocean. Once he was in the Pacific, he and his shipmates saw lots of action, from submarine attacks to air attacks. He served our nation with honor and duty during his time in the U.S. Navy, and we are very grateful for his service. Now, let's explore how the companies in Pennsylvania helped win the war.
Among the country's many steel companies, U.S. Steel and other steel companies in Pennsylvania supplied 31% of the nation's steel supplies during the war. Steel mills operated 24 hours a day, making 95 million tons of steel. Bethlehem Steel, along with other steel companies in PA, was responsible for making 1/3 of the steel for the nation's two-ocean fleet. This steel company alone received over $1.3 billion in orders to make all sorts of military supplies.
As you can see, the people of Pennsylvania did many things for the war effort. Families rationed food so that there would be more for the soldiers abroad. Families, especially children, helped with collecting rubber, steel, and other needed materials. Pennsylvania also made the majority of the steel and the ships that left for the harbors around the world. Without the arsenal of America, the Allied powers would have probably not won the war. Thank you.